Hello and welcome to Mentora IAS. I am Safir and I welcome you in today's core concept series of videos where we discuss a lot of current affairs related to prelims and mains examination. So in this particular video, we are going to decode what exactly is the problem between Israel and Palestine. This particular problem is a problem also unofficially called the problem of the century, because this is something which has been stretching out for more than 100 years now. Okay, so in this particular video we are going to completely demystify this thing for you. तो आज के वीडियो में हम ये समझने वाले हैं कि इजराइल और पैलेस्टीन का कॉन्फ्लिक्ट क्या है, और इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का बैकग्राउंड जो आता है वो आता है इजराइल हमास की कॉन्फ्लिक्ट से जो अभी चल रहा है. सो आखिरी तक इस वीडियो में बने रहो और इस चीज़ को समझने की कोशिश करो कि आज का जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है उसका रीज़न क्या है, उसके ओरिजिन कहाँ से हैं, एंड सब्सिक्वेंटली अभी फिलहाल इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में क्या स्टेज चल रहा है. So we are going to discuss it right from the very beginning, and we are going to take it to the current situation which is existing between Israel and Hamas, and for that matter Palestine, because right now as we speak there is a peace negotiation that is going on in Egypt between Israel and the Hamas, so that the Gaza Strip, where this particular conflict is right now raging for the past 3 years, this is in some way contained and subsequently the zone is restored to its tranquility. So welcome to Mentora IAS once again, and before we go ahead, I would want to draw your attention towards the social media handles that we have here. Okay, so we are present at Instagram, Facebook, Telegram and YouTube. I request you that you join these channels so that you are always updated with the content and always updated with the material. In this particular channels, we are also going to post what exactly are the important things of the day along with the handouts that are going to be circulated through the Mentora IAS official Telegram channel. So all the videos that are actually coming onto this particular platform related to current affairs are also having a handout. Okay, and that detailed handout is basically there for you to augment your notes in order for you to understand if you missed something in the video, that you will find that in the handout, and subsequently you can be making your own notes, but that is something which will be available here. So I welcome you all to join these channels, and apart from that we will also be conducting a lot of UPSC centric activities. You can ask your questions regarding UPSC and subsequently we are there to handle you. Okay, so now let us begin with this particular topic. So what exactly has been the news? So this news actually is a culmination of the 3 years of war that has actually been going on between Israel and Hamas. So on October 7th, 2023, Hamas actually attacked the territory of Israel in an unprovoked fashion. Okay, there was no provocation from the Israeli side. It was Hamas which attacked the Israeli side. It crossed the borders using its ground forces. It took hostages, and at the same time, within a span of 20 minutes, it launched a barrage of missiles. Okay, so it launched a barrage of missiles, and subsequently what happened was that in this particular confrontation, Israeli defense forces, that is the military of Israel, the intelligence of Israel, and at the same time the air defense system of Israel was completely overwhelmed. So this resulted in the securing of about 251 hostages from Israel, okay, by the Hamas. So after this particular attack, Israel launched a war, and that war is what we are actually talking about, which has culminated, or you can say it has completed its 3 years on 7th of October 2025. So what has happened is that on September 29, okay, September 29, 2025, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, okay, so President of United States, I have also told you in my previous videos that it is abbreviated as POTUS, okay, that is the official call sign. So when you talk about the President of the United States, he proposed a 20-point peace plan in order to demilitarize Gaza. Okay, so there are various aspects which need to be agreed between these two parties, that is Hamas on one side and Israel on another side, and once they agree to it, it will ensure lasting ceasefire and at the same time peace and tranquility in the region. Okay, so on the backdrop of this particular news, we are going to understand the entire conflict between Israel and Hamas. Okay, so the negotiations are going on as we speak, because there are certain areas on which Hamas has already agreed and there are certain areas that it is not willing to give up. and that is why these negotiations are actually going on right now in Egypt. Okay, so let us understand this in totality. So let us first of all understand what exactly is the war. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you what exactly is the current war, and then subsequently in the coming slides we are also going to discuss the entire background. So currently we are talking about the current conflict. Okay, now the conflict has two parties. Okay, there are two parties. One is Hamas and the other one is Israel. Why am I writing Hamas? Because Hamas is no country. Hamas is basically a political and militant unit of one of the organizations that is related to Palestine. But still, with respect to Palestine, it does not enjoy a lot of popular support as of now. Okay, so Hamas and Israel, these are two parties to the conflict. Okay, they have been engaged in war since 7th October 2023. Okay, and with respect to this particular war, it is Israel which was first attacked. Okay, so Hamas was the one which attacked Israel. And with respect to this particular attack, this attack was based upon aerial bombing. Okay, that is basically bombing using missiles. Okay, you might have also heard this particular word as projectiles. Okay, the second thing was ground operations. So with respect to this particular ground operations, I will be writing ground ops. Okay, so with respect to this particular ground operations, there were hostages taken. Hostages taken from Israel by Hamas. Okay, that's the first thing that we need to understand. Okay, and as a result, what has happened as a result is that in this particular conflict, about 1200 Israelis lost their life. Okay, and this is basically the largest fatalities in Israel till date. Okay, so about 1200 Israelis, they lost their life, and then subsequently this was the largest single day loss of lives for Israel. Okay, now the point being, I am still saying that this is Israel. Okay, I am still pointing it out because before 1948, okay, there was no Israel. So at that particular time, we actually talk about the Holocaust. Okay, Holocaust was basically a you can say a kind of ethnic cleansing that was executed by the Nazis in Germany, and subsequently that was for persecution of the Jews. Okay, so after that 1948 Israel becomes a country, and since that day till this particular date, there has been no single day on which so many lives of the Israeli citizens have been lost. Okay, this is basically what happened. Okay, now what did this result into? This is basically what was resulting into. This result was basically the ongoing conflict where Israel swore revenge. It declared war against Hamas, and at the same time it has two objectives. Okay, so now let us discuss the objectives of these two you can say parties. So first of all, why did Hamas attack Israel? Okay, we need to understand this as well. Why exactly the Hamas attacked Israel? Okay, so the first one, okay, the first reason that they have given to the world is that to resist military occupancy and inhuman control over Palestinians. Okay, and this is something that they also officially call plight of the Palestinians, that the world needed to know what exactly is the plight of the Palestinians. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, apart from that, the second thing was to force Israel to end the blockade over Gaza. Or Gaza Strip. That's the second thing. Okay. So, with respect to the Gaza Strip, what exactly is the situation right now? That in Gaza, okay, before 7th of October 2023, there was no Israeli military, presence, okay, but only in Gaza Strip, okay. Control of airspace and territorial waters by Israel. This still continues. And the third one is basically naval blockade of Gaza. Okay, so these are basically the three things with respect to the current situation that we have about Israel. That Israel since 2005 does not have a military presence in Gaza, but the point being that Gaza is basically one such land that is completely isolated from both the sides. On one side we have Israel, on the other side we have Egypt. Okay, so I'll just show you in a very rudimentary fashion. We'll be seeing that over a map as well. Okay, so this is basically the Gaza Strip. Okay, this is the Gaza Strip. It is called strip because it looks like a strip. Okay, on the north of Gaza, we have Israel. On the east of Gaza, we have Israel. On the south of Gaza, we have Egypt. Okay, and then on the west of Gaza, what do we have? We have the Mediterranean coast or the Mediterranean Sea. Now, technically what has happened is that Israel maintains a complete blockade, okay, over Gaza throughout its border, and then Egypt is the one which maintains a blockade over the border that comes with respect to Egypt. Now, this access to the Mediterranean Sea, which is basically the coast of Gaza, this is not allowed for Gaza. So, no ships actually can enter into Gaza and no ships from Gaza can leave to the international waters. So, technically no imports and no exports as long as the Israel government or the Israeli Navy does not allow it. Okay. So, that is basically why they say that they want to force Israel to give up this particular you can say bottlenecking or strangle holding of the place. Okay. Now, the third point, why did they attack? Okay. The third point, to negotiate release of political prisoners and other Gazans or the citizens of Gaza or Gaza, okay, in exchange of the hostages. Okay, and the fourth reason that they give, to accelerate the process of statehood of Palestine. This is basically what Hamas maintains as its objectives for this particular attack. Okay, but a lot of people from from Palestine actually do not see this as the right way. Okay, and subsequently Hamas on itself is not actually being supported by a lot of countries. Yes, there are definitely a few countries in the neighborhood like Iran, okay, which support the cause of Hamas, but they basically also maintain this distance that okay, you should not be doing anything which is not provocative. Okay, so if you provoke someone, then you have to bear the consequence of it, and based upon this, the retaliation from the Israeli side is military. Okay, so Israel basically has two objectives. Okay, now let us talk about the objectives of Israel. So as of now, Israel basically has got two objectives. First one, release of all hostages. Okay, and the second one, complete decimation and elimination of Hamas. And subsequently expanding military presence. Now this is something which is actually said by the political leaders of this particular country. So expanding military presence in Gaza. So this is basically their objectives. So I hope now the objectives are clear, the players are clear, who exactly are the two players here. Okay. Now let us talk about what exactly is the background situation. So this is something which is the most violent kind of conflict that they are seeing as of now. Okay, but this particular conflict is not something which is anything new for this region. Okay, this particular region has been seeing the tensions simmering since the time of World War and sometimes even before that. So let us understand the background of this. So I hope this entire situation as of now is clear. Okay, so when you study this particular conflict, what do we need to study? We need to study first of all what exactly is the background, how exactly this particular conflict has come into being. Okay, the second thing, the peace plan that may be negotiated, or that is something which is going to be the final deal for restoring peace in Gaza. What exactly are the provisions of this particular peace plan? And then finally, how does India, okay, balance these two sides, Israel as well as Palestine? Okay, we are going to discuss all the three now. The first one, the background to the conflict. So when we talk about the background to the conflict, so I would take you right to the time when this thing actually began during the First World War. Okay, so during the First World War, the you can say the world, basically it was not about the world that was getting involved. It was only the powers in the European region, which were colonial powers, which were trying to fight for territorial expansion. Okay, so when we talk about the First World War, so the end of the First World War was the defeat of Germany and the fall of the Ottoman Empire of which basically was spreading at that particular time in the regions of Middle East or West Asia and parts of Europe. Okay, so this entire thing that you are seeing is basically what was the Ottoman Empire. So Ottoman Empire was a very famous and powerful empire of the Middle Ages or the medieval time. Okay, this was basically the first you can say empire that could conquer Constantinople, which then became Istanbul. Okay, so Constantinople or Istanbul was for the first time captured by the Islamic forces by the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and subsequently this is basically the entire region which was actually the expanse of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so it basically crossed the Black Sea. It had a lot of regions with respect to the Mediterranean Sea and almost the Mediterranean coast right up to the Strait of Gibraltar. Okay, then with respect to the region of Asia, we basically find that there was a lot of region in the region of Arabian Peninsula where they were present. So this is basically the entire region of the Ottoman Empire. Now, because of this grand, or you can say a large territory that was actually present, okay, Now this was something which was a very interesting thing for the British. Okay, why? Because when you talk about the British, Russia, Italy, okay, and France, these were the 4 countries which actually came together as allies, and they wanted to fight off Germany and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so now we are going to understand what exactly happened. So first thing is that Ottoman Empire was very powerful. So in order to defeat this particular empire, you would want to have allies in the region. And at the same time, when you're talking about allies in the region, you would want to know what exactly is the demography of the region. And British on that particular front were experts of understanding demography and subsequently in that particular manner how to solicit their support. Okay. So in that sequence, there were a series of letters which were actually exchanged between 2 individuals. There was McMahon, that was actually a British Army Lieutenant General, and subsequently there was the Sharif of the Makkah city. Okay, so this was basically the Sharif of Makkah. Okay, and this was basically an army personnel from the British Army. Okay, now what happened was that these 2 individuals were basically the one who exchanged certain letters. Okay, there was a series of communication between the 2 sides, and in this particular letter there were 2 kinds of demands which were made. The first demand was made by the Arab forces. Okay, so when you talk about the Sharif of Makkah, now this particular individual was supposed to be the ruler of Makkah. Okay, so Makkah basically is one of the holiest sites of Islam. As of today, it lies in Saudi Arabia, and that is why when you talk about the individuals who lived there were basically Arabs. Okay, so these Arabs, they wanted that even after the fall of Ottoman Empire, it is Arabs whose independence should be recognized. Okay, and it should be recognized in all those regions where they exist. Okay, so that was basically the objective of the Sharif of Makkah. Okay, now when you talk about McMahon, so he basically had the objective to secure the support of this entire you can say region of Arabs. So when we talk about this entire region of Arabs, so what we understand is that in the British Army, they at this particular time wanted that McMahon actually spoke in terms of the British. Okay, that the British government actually supported the cause of the Arabs. Okay, so the Arabs were basically the one whose independence, whose recognition will be supported by the British, and at the same time it will be the British who are going to secure this entire region for them. Okay, but in exchange they wanted that the Arabs should rise in revolt against the Ottoman Sultan. Okay, so what would happen, that as an army, the British army was strong enough, but Ottoman Empire had a large army and a very demanding one. Okay, so subsequently what is going to happen is that if the army is weakened from within, how is it going to be weakened from the within? If within the state only there are certain elements which need to be you can say dealt with by the Sultan's forces, so subsequently you will have less amount of resources for the war, and that is basically what is going to be taking up the concept of you can say defeating, because you will have less amount of men to fight the war for you, and subsequently your borders will eventually give way. So that is why the McMahon-Hussein agreement, or you can say the McMahon-Hussein you can say correspondence, basically recognize that Palestine, which was one of the regions under the Ottoman Empire at that particular time, will be the one which will be recognized as an Arab you can say province. So all the Arab province beyond the Arabian Peninsula will all be taken together and they are going to be considered as independent. Okay, so there will be an Arab province here. So this is something which was promised in the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, and this is basically the letter. When you want to read it, you may read it. You will also find this particular letter's copy well in Wikipedia as well as other you can say sites as well. Now, after this particular correspondence and you can say commitment to the Arab, the Sharif of Makkah, now there was a secret agreement which happened between the allied forces. Okay, now the allies, primarily first of the two are Great Britain and France. Okay, So between Great Britain and France started the discussion called Sykes-Picot Agreement or Sykes-Picot Agreement, whatever you want to say it. Now, according to this particular agreement, they were more interested to see what would happen if Ottoman Empire fell. So if the Ottoman Empire fell, they wanted to secure the best of the regions for themselves. And subsequently later on, Russia and Italy also joined this particular agreement. So based upon this Sykes-Picot Agreement, the entire you can say promise or commitment by the British that Palestine would be one of the regions that will be recognized as an Arab province. Okay, now that is something which was completely negated. So in this particular regard, what happened was that this entire region of the Ottoman Empire would be divided amongst these four powers. Okay, so this entire region was the one which is basically going to be with the British. Okay, this region would be the one which would go to the French. This would go to Russia. Okay, and then subsequently the other regions which were basically here are going to be under international protection. So that basically was this particular region. Okay, and this was Italy. Okay, sorry, this was French, and this is Italy. So this is basically what was the scenario here. Okay, now Palestine was supposed to be under the joint protection of all these three. But the issue was that in 1917, Russia became weak because in Russia came the Russian Revolution, and subsequently Russia was the one which came out of this entire war. Okay, but what exactly is going to happen to the territory? The territories are still very, very interesting for everyone. So ultimately what basically happens is that in this particular region, Palestine, this becomes one of the regions where not only these countries want to have their influence, but also the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so that is why it is very, very important to be secured. Now the point being, when we talk about Palestine as of now, so in this particular time, Palestine basically has got the demography of Arab majority. Okay, and then there is a minority. There is a minority of Jews. So now subsequently what is happening is that here the Jews actually were living. Initially also they were living. So what has happened is that in this particular region is a place called Jerusalem. Okay, so Jerusalem basically is the region around which the Jews say that that is basically the God of the land of God, and subsequently that is a promised land which basically belongs to them. When you talk about the Arab majority, they are followers of Islam. For them also this is very, very important. Okay, but historically this particular region is the one where we had the you can say we have the occupation of Arabs and a minority of Jews. Now Jews are coming to this particular region through migration. Okay, so when you talk about migration with respect to the Jews, that is something which is called as aliyah. Okay, so there is a particular word which is called aliyah. Okay, this basically means migration. So what has happened is that in Palestine, the migration has happened in waves. Okay, so that is why the initial two are basically called first aliyah and the second aliyah. So the first aliyah basically was the one which came up in 1882. Okay, now these are basically the one who actually came in as farmers, as agriculturalists. Okay, and the second one basically came between 1903 to 1914. These are the two waves before the beginning of the First World War that saw Jewish migration to the territory of Palestine. So it is natural that if the migration is going to happen, the demography is going to change. Eventually the numbers are going to increase. Okay, so that is basically the initial thing. I hope Sykes-Picot Agreement is clear. Okay, now after the World War, what happened? After the World War, this entire region got segregated. Okay, now what happened was that this entire region came under the responsibility of the British. Okay, that is why it was called the British Mandate. I'll tell you what exactly is the British Mandate. Okay, this orangish region, this is something which became the French Mandate. Okay, so what we see is that towards the end of the First World War, there is a new organization that gets created. Okay, so in 1919, we see the foundation of something called the League of Nations. Okay, this was basically the predecessor of the United Nations, and its objective was to prevent any further reoccurrence of a war of the scale of the First World War. Okay, so these League of Nations were initially those nations which understood that there is no profit in war, and subsequently all the disputes should actually be resolved in a cooperative manner. So based upon this League of Nations agreement, the territory that was occupied or that was won by the victors of the war, that was to be divided, and subsequently based upon the League of Nations, they created mandates. Okay, that basically means the divisions of the territory, which were later on called the spoils of the war. And subsequently the two regions, the region of Palestine, Transjordan, and subsequently Syria, the part of you can say the Ottoman Empire. Now they were basically the ones which had to be divided. So all the regions of Iraq, for that matter Jordan, for that matter Palestine, they all came together under the British. Okay, and the region of Syria and Lebanon went to the French. Okay, so that is why these French actually call this particular coast, okay, this entire coast that you're seeing here, okay, this coast is something which is called by the French as Levant. This was also a previous year question with respect to prelims. There are a lot of previous year questions which have come from this particular concept. Okay, I'll be telling you them intermittently. Okay, one question was Levant. So this eastern coast of the Mediterranean was actually called as Levant by the French. Why? Because it was their mandate. Okay, and then Palestine basically became the British mandate. I hope these things are clear. Okay, now there is one word that I would want to bring to your notice, and that is called Yishuv. Okay, Yishuv, Yishuv. Okay, so these were the individuals who basically followed Judaism, or they were Jews, okay, who came to the land of Palestine before 1948. All of them are actually called Yishuv. Okay, so as of now, when you talk about the individuals who basically came via the Aliyah, they are all going to be called the Yishuv. So they are going to be the Palestinian Jews before 1948. Okay, so this is the first thing that we need to understand. Okay, after this, what happens in 1917 when the World War was actually going on? So in 1915 we have the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, where the British actually promised the liberation of the territories of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire and all the provinces beyond the Arabian Peninsula to be consolidated together as an independent Arabian province. Okay, that they will be an independent Arab province, and Palestine was one of that particular region. In 1916, what they do? They basically go beyond the agreement or the commitment that they actually gave to the Sharif of Makkah, and they basically come up with the Sykes-Picot agreement, and subsequently what happens that they have divided this entire region based upon their own conveniences and profits. Okay, now what happens in 1917, they do another such step, and that is basically called the Balfour Declaration. Okay, so Balfour Declaration is basically one such statement by the government of Britain that actually promised the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Okay, so in 1917 what happened was that we have Arthur Balfour, who basically was the Foreign Secretary of Britain at that particular time. This is the Indian equivalent of External Affairs Minister, and he basically wrote a letter to Lord Rothschild. So Lord Rothschild was basically the leader of the British Jewish community. Okay, so he basically wrote a letter to Lord Rothschild, and subsequently he asked Lord Rothschild to convey this particular message to the Federation of the Jewish Communities in Britain and Ireland, that was called the Zionist Federation. Now this Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland, they were actually promised. Okay, so they were promised the creation of a Jewish homeland. In Palestine. Under the British mandate. Okay. So subsequently, this particular declaration was given by the British government, and for them, it was Arthur Balfour who gave this particular agreement. Okay. Now, this entire promise had the instrumental role played by a very important gentleman called Chaim Weizmann. Okay. So Chaim Weizmann basically was instrumental in getting the Balfour Declaration first of all accepted, then subsequently publicly endorsed, and this particular individual in the future becomes the first president of Israel. Okay, he becomes the first president of Israel. So now what has happened? So till now in 3 years we have seen 3 different types of commitments that are being made by the British. The first one to the Arabs, the second one negating the first one, and the third one to the Jews. Okay, and this is exactly the point where this entire episode of the question of Palestine comes into play. Okay, so now subsequently what happens is that after this particular Balfour Declaration in 1920, because now the British government has accepted that okay, we are going to establish a Jewish homeland in the region of Palestine, the Jews begin to migrate towards Palestine. Okay, so in 1920 what happens is that this influx of immigration from the Jewish side, okay, now that is something that actually creates problems with respect to the Palestinian population. And in Palestine, Jerusalem is basically the place which is the center of power and politics. So the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, he basically declares that the immigration from the Jewish side and the rising sentiment of the Jewish nationalists, now that is the sole enemy of Palestine and this particular Grand Mufti. And subsequently, he declares that this is something which needs to be solved comprehensively and permanently. And eventually, that turns out into a riot. Okay, a civil riot that actually breaks out between the Palestinians and Jews. Okay, although the initial reason was the uncontrolled immigration, but the point is it was inflamed by religious sentiments. Okay, and subsequently then what happened was that in order to protect the Jewish community from this, the paramilitary force of the Jewish called Hanaga actually comes into picture. Okay, so when you talk about Hanaga, so this was something which basically is the paramilitary force. This was a paramilitary force for the protection of the Jews. Okay, and they basically have been formed in order to retaliate against the Arabs. Now the point being in 1920, Arabs are in majority and you basically see the Jews are in minority. So as of now, you are going to be defensive. Okay, then eventually what is going to happen, you basically go underground and you now plot revenge. Okay, so this is basically what happened in 1920. Now in 1922, officially the British mandate of Palestine was established. Okay, so after this particular establishment, what happened was that the rate of Jewish immigration towards you can say Palestine continuously grew. And in this particular time, 1923 to 1947, when the Jewish immigration was growing up, what also happened was that a separate Jewish economy was being created in this particular region with foreign support. Why? Because the British were actually supporting the Jews in order to establish their estate. And subsequently what happened was that this is something which culminated in a two-way problem. The first one, that Jews now have control over some sectors of economy that is built on the support of the foreign nationals. Okay, and at the same time there are Arabs who are pushing this back, that this is our land, we have been residing here for long, and subsequently you cannot be doing this to us. Okay, so this tussle between the two sides then culminated into something called the Arab Revolt. Okay, so the Arab revolt basically happened between 1936 to 1939, and during this particular time, this particular revolt was against the you can say an enormous amount of Jewish immigration that was happening. Okay, but this particular revolt was brutally suppressed by the British forces in association with the Jewish forces, which actually protected the Jewish communities and settlements in the Palestine region. Okay, so in this particular regard, what we find is that this is also a pain point with respect to Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. Okay, that you have been basically participating in the violent suppression of this particular revolt. And subsequently, in order to understand what exactly are the reasons for the tensions in the Palestinian mandate, in 1936, Peel Commission was established. So Peel Commission was basically a royal commission that was led by Lord Peel. Okay, so led by an individual called Lord Peel, and this commission had the mandate to understand the reasons why this Arab revolt had happened or is happening. Okay, so this was done in order to ensure that the administrative viability of the place could be you can say maintained. Now what basically did Lord Peel say? Okay, so Lord Peel Commission in 1937, it basically concluded that Jews and Palestinian Arabs cannot live together. Palestinian Arabs cannot live together. So subsequently what needs to be done? It recommended creation of a small Jewish nation. Carved out from Palestine. Okay. Now this is basically what Lord Peel recommended. For the very first time, the partition of the Palestinian region came as one of the official recommendations. Now this was something which was accepted by certain Zionist leaders but rejected by Arabs. And this is very obvious that the Arabs are going to reject it. Why? Because they perceive it as their own land. So if it is their own land, why would they want this land to go away to some other state or some other country with a different ethnicity, with a different religion? So that is why it was rejected by the Arabs. And ultimately, this particular region was, this particular recommendation was, you can say, rejected. This was also rejected by the Zionist Congress as well. Rejected by Zionist Congress. Now with respect to this Zionist Congress, the objective of the Zionist Congress was that we need to displace the Palestinians from Palestine so as to establish a Jewish state in that region. Okay, so the entire region of Palestine needs to be Jewish land. It cannot be having any Palestinians. So for them, displacement basically meant violent displacement. Okay, so they basically had the idea of violently displacing the Palestinians. And this is basically the reason why the suspicion has grown between the two sides, because the Zionist international region, or you can say the foundation of the Zionist principle, was that the Palestinians need to be displaced from Palestine. There we are going to have an Israeli state, okay, or a Jewish state. And this is exactly where another you can say antibody, or for that matter you can say an antithesis of this is going to come up, and that is going to be Hamas. Okay, so that is basically having the exact reverse objective as that of this particular association. Okay, so now what happened was that after this particular Peel's commission and its rejection, now the Jewish settlements, because now they have their paramilitary forces organized, now they also have their own militia. So they start attacking the British as well. Okay, now their objective to attack the British is to ensure that the British are now going to be forced to accept that Jewish settlements that have come up in Palestine need to be made into a separate state. Okay, and that is why they continuously keep on harassing the British forces even in Palestine. Okay, so subsequently after the Second World War, when the economy of British was decimated and at the same time British had no longer the interest or the courage to actually fulfill the administrative duties of the region of Palestine, they refer this problem to the United Nations. So United Nations in this particular regard comes up with a particular plan which is called the UN Partition Plan. Okay, so the UN Partition Plan basically was dependent upon two things, that this entire region needs to be divided in three halves. Okay, so there will be three parts. One which will be the Jewish part. Okay, the one which will be actually the Arab part, and the last one basically would be the city of Jerusalem. Okay, so the Jewish part in this particular map is all the orange regions. Okay, all the orange regions are basically the Jewish part. Okay, so in the region of Palestine, which once upon a time had the majority of Arabs, now is seeing majority of the land going to Palestine, to the Jewish. Okay, and the yellow parts are basically the ones which are going to be with the Arabs. Okay, so this will be with the Arabs, this will be with the Arabs, and this one will be the Arabs. Okay, so this small region that you're seeing, this is what is the Gaza Strip. Okay, this is exactly what is the Gaza Strip. Okay, now the point being, now we have Jerusalem. Now with respect to Jerusalem, now this is something which will be internationally administered. Okay, it will be internationally administered, meaning that it will be neither with the Arabs nor with the Jewish. It is something which will be under the United Nations administration. Okay, so this particular plan was the one which was again accepted by Jews and rejected by Arabs. But this particular resolution in the United Nations General Assembly saw a lot of you can say arm twisting by the Jewish lobby. Okay, so the Jews actually sent all their you can say lobbyists to all the countries who at that particular time were the members of the United Nations, including India. And this particular plan was the one on which India voted against. So the vote of India was against this particular resolution. Still, this particular resolution was you can say passed, but India voted against it. Okay. So at that particular time, our Prime Minister Nehru, he basically said that India was being threatened. It was being bribed with millions of dollars by the Jewish so as to get a favorable vote for this particular settlement. And at the same time, the Jews were also you can say harassing Vijay Lakshmi Pandit at that particular time, the representative of India to the United Nations, to vote favorably so that she would be not having any kind of bearing on her life. So you can say angry on this particular move of the you can say Jewish at that particular time, India voted against this particular thing. Apart from that, this was one particular region where India also believed that self-determination is the way to go. Why? Because at that particular time, Gandhi was the one who had this particular idea that this region originally belonged to the Arabs. There is no doubt about it. Okay. But at the same time, if they have to peacefully coexist, that needs to come from a solution within them. No international, you can say organization or international pressure can actually guide their problem. Okay. Or something subsequently dictate their solution. Okay. So that was basically the United Nations partition plan, which did not come into existence. But what followed after this particular resolution? Okay, so after this resolution, after UN resolution passes, Now basically what happens? Violence breaks out. In Palestine. One of the worst violence breaks out in Palestine. Subsequently, this is something which is called the War of Palestine in 1948. So in 1948, two things happen. Okay, between this particular resolution that was passed and the beginning of 1948, this War of Palestine is going on, and this has actually created a large scale displacement of the Palestinians. Displacement of Palestinians. Okay, this is basically, and this particular displacement was the one which was violent, very violent displacement of the Palestinians from all the places that you are actually seeing that were supposed to be Arab. Okay. Subsequently, what happens is that in 1948, we find that in 1948 on 14th of May, Israel declares independence. Okay, but this particular move could not be done by the Palestinians. Why? Because the Palestinians already were right now in a large scale refugee crisis. Okay, because of this entire event. And subsequently, in the same year 1948 on 15th of May, this is something that is observed by the Palestinians as something called Nakba, which means trauma. Okay, so Nakba or trauma is basically the remembrance of all the displacement, all the atrocities that the Palestinians had to bear between the UN partition plan and this particular you can say declaration of Israel as an independent country. So whatever the collective trauma they have, that is something which is remembered as Nakba, and 15th of May every year is celebrated by them as Nakba Day or Nakba Remembrance Day. Okay, I hope this is something which is clear. Now comes the next part. There was a particular region in the UN partition plan which was called the West Bank. Okay, now if I go back to the UN partition plan, this yellow region is something which is actually called the West Bank. I'm writing this as West Bank. Now we need to understand what exactly is the West Bank. Okay, I have told you this is Gaza and this is the West Bank and this is Jerusalem. We are going to see what exactly is West Bank now. Okay. Now at the same time, I would also want to highlight this, that this UN partition plan, okay, from this particular plan starts the concept of two-state solution. Okay, again one of the PYQs with respect to UPSC, that the two-state solution, that basically means peaceful coexistence of both Palestine as well as Israel. Okay, that is something which was for the first time officially proposed by the UN partition plan, resolution 181/2. Okay, so this is something which is clear. Now, what exactly is the West Bank? Now, West Bank is basically defined as a district, okay, which is the larger of the two districts that is actually you can say occupied by the Palestinian Arabs. So Palestinian Arabs are found in two regions. One is this Gaza Strip. Okay, one is this Gaza Strip and the other one is basically the West Bank. So Gaza Strip is basically where the current conflict is going on. West Bank is basically one of the regions where we see the presence of Palestinian Arabs but under the military occupation of Israel. Okay, so what exactly is West Bank? So West Bank is basically the west bank of River Jordan. Now River Jordan basically is the boundary between West Bank, okay, and Jordan, the country Jordan. Okay, so this is basically a river that flows from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. Okay, so here we have the Sea of Galilee. Okay, now with respect to the flow of the river, Jordan flows from Sea of Galilee towards the Dead Sea, and subsequently this is the east side of Jordan River, where we have the Jordan country, and that one becomes the west bank of Jordan. Okay, that is why this particular region is called the West Bank. Okay, this is the West Bank that we are talking about, and this as of now is a district. Okay, where the majority, or basically this is basically the region where you find Palestinian Arabs living, and at the same time a part of this particular territory is also Jerusalem. Okay, now what basically is the concept here? The sticking point is that Jerusalem is claimed as the capital of both Palestine as well as Israel. Israel wants Jerusalem to be their capital. Palestine wants it to be their capital. As of now, the Palestinian Authority has its headquarters in Ramallah. Okay, so now when we talk about this particular thing, West Bank, so there are two types of governments here. Okay, in West Bank, the government is headed by Fatah. Okay, this is basically a political party, and this is basically the one which is heading the government at West Bank, and they basically want peaceful resolution with Israel. Now subsequently when we talk about Gaza, so Gaza is governed by Hamas. Okay, and as of now Fatah and Hamas, they do not see eye to eye with respect to their methods, because for Hamas, Israel should not exist. Fatah is far more realistic. It basically says that Israel is existing and it will exist. We need to, you can say, adopt a kind of approach that is going to first of all ensure peace and also open up the economy of Palestine. Because for a prolonged period of time, this is something which is completely decimated. The people are only suffering here. Okay, so that is basically the West Bank. Now, when we talk about Jerusalem, why is everyone so much interested in Jerusalem? So this is basically an aerial view of the old city of Jerusalem. Okay, so in this old city of Jerusalem, this is something which is a very, very holy site for three different religions. Okay, the first one we have is Islam, the second one is Judaism, the third one is Christianity. Okay, so why do these three religions lay claim over this particular territory? So with respect to Islam, this particular old city is divided in two halves. Okay, one is called the Muslim quarter, where the Palestinian Arabs are there, and one is called the Jewish quarters, which is basically where the Jews actually live. Okay, now the point is that Jerusalem as of now comes within the West Bank district. So this particular region has got military occupation of Israel. And subsequently what happens is that the Muslims actually find a lot of discrimination by the Jewish forces here, and subsequently the Israeli military. Okay, and this is basically what has always led to violent clashes and face-offs between the Israeli police forces and defense forces with respect to Palestine. Okay, now what exactly is so important? So what you're seeing right now is basically called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, this is a very, very important you can say site with respect to Islam. Okay, this city is the third holiest. Okay, after Medina, Makkah comes Jerusalem. So this is basically the city where it is believed that Prophet Muhammad was the one who found himself when he was actually taken to have a conversation with the God. When he saw the afterlife and came back, he basically found himself here. So in that memory, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is something which is very, very pious. And beyond the Al-Aqsa Mosque comes the Dome of Rock, one of the holiest sites of Islam. Okay, now with respect to the Jews, this particular region is the last wall of the Temple Mount which was actually present here. Okay, so with respect to the Jews, this particular city is actually the holiest city for the Jews, and it is believed that it was the land where God resided for the Jews. Okay, so that is why with respect to this particular city, it was actually called Zion. So it is Jerusalem whose synonym is Zion. Okay, so now subsequently what happens is that this particular city had two temples which were built. Okay, The second temple was the one which was built at this particular site. And this was something which was destroyed by the Babylonians. And the only remnant of that temple is basically this wall, which is called the Western Wall, or is also famously called the Wailing Wall. Okay. Now, this particular wall is the most holiest, or you can say the holiest of the place for all the Jewish followers. Okay. And subsequently, what we find here is that in this particular regard, all the Jews throughout the world, wherever they are, they actually pray in the direction of this particular wall. You might have found this with respect to the followers of Islam as well, that when you talk about the followers of Islam, they actually worship by facing the direction towards where you have the Kaaba. Okay, that is basically in, you can say, Saudi Arabia. So all the Muslims face towards that side. So with respect to India, that is on the west. And subsequently with respect to all the Jews, they face towards this particular direction where we have the you can say the Wailing Wall. So again, with respect to India, this is on the western side. So even the Jews actually, you can say, pray towards the west. Okay. So this is basically for the first two of the religions. Now we have the third religion, Christianity. With respect to Christianity, again, this is a very, very holy place. Now it is believed that Jesus Christ during his childhood days was brought here to visit the temple. Okay. So at the during his childhood days, he came here as a worshipper. Okay. When he attained adulthood, then he basically started preaching the poor, educating the poor and healing them in the temple courts. And subsequently this also represents the place where he was arrested and crucified. And subsequently after that he was resurrected in the same place. So that is why there is something which is called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Okay. So the Church of Holy Sepulchre is basically the church which is believed to house both the sites. Okay. The first site where he actually taught, and the second site where he was actually resurrected. After crucifixion, he was resurrected from the same site. So this complex is basically the whole Church of Holy Sepulchre. Okay. So that is why the three religions have claim over this particular region. And in that, it is basically the Islam and Judaism, that is basically the Palestinian Arabs and the Jews. They basically claim their, you can say, authority over this particular region, that should be their capital. And that is why Jerusalem basically is one of the sticking points. Okay, both that sides, when you talk about Israel and when you talk about Palestine, they want this as their capital. And that is why in Jerusalem also, this is divided in two halves. Okay, so this particular region which you are seeing, okay, this particular region that you are seeing is something which is called as East Jerusalem. And this particular region that you are seeing is basically called West Jerusalem. So a part of negotiation is also that the West Jerusalem should go to the Jews, that is Israel, and the East Jerusalem is something which should come to the Palestine. So the final resolution of the status of Palestine is also going to be a very, very important part with respect to the two-state solution. Okay, now this is basically that wall that you are seeing as the Western Wall, also called as the Wailing Wall, but it is called a Wailing Wall informally. This was basically a description that was given by European travelers when they saw that the Jewish pilgrims, they actually come here and they, you can say, mourn the loss of the temple. So that is why this particular site was actually described as Wailing Wall. Okay, so this is basically what is the concept of, you can say, Jerusalem and its importance. Okay, so in 1948, when the Palestinians were faced with a massive crisis of displacement due to the Nakba, or basically the violent displacement that was being carried out by the Jewish paramilitary forces, which eventually became the Israeli Defense Forces. Okay, and subsequently a reactionary thing was also done with respect to the Arabs. So now what happened was that the Arabs actually were the one who were displaced, and subsequently in order for them to take their position back, the allies of the region, all the Muslim countries of the region, when you talk about this, we have Syria, we have Jordan, Egypt. These countries, they joined forces and they basically created a volunteer based force. Okay, that was going to fight for Palestine in order to wrest the control back. Okay. So now subsequently what happened was that after the declaration of independence by by Israel, now what happened was that Egypt, it took over this entire region which is called the Gaza Strip. Okay, this was something which was taken up by Egypt. This is something which was taken as, this is Gaza, taken over by Egypt. Okay, now this is basically the West Bank. Now this was taken over by Jordan, while the other places actually they remained with respect to Israel. So this blue line that you're seeing is basically the line which actually separates the occupation of the Egypt, Jordan from Israel. Okay, so this was basically the situation in 1948. Okay, and this was basically when the ceasefire was announced in between these countries. This was basically the occupation. Okay, so this region was controlled, you can say controlled as of now by Egypt. This region was with Jordan and this was with the Israeli part. So from 1948 we have Israel. Okay, so now what happens is that after this particular war in 1950, Israel comes up with a law that is called the law of return. Okay, so this law of return basically meant that all Jews and their spouses can return to Israel and live as citizens. So this is basically one of the most famous principles that actually is there in the world, that all the Jews wherever they are in the world, they basically come and they belong to Israel. So if they come to Israel, they will be given citizenship, they will also be given voting rights. So they will have the same rights as that of the citizens. So this was basically called the law of return that was passed in 1950, that all the Jews in the world can actually find their Jewish home at Israel. Okay, now Israel as a word basically means the land of the God, and Israelites, that is basically the individuals who live in Israel, they basically are called the children of the God. Okay, now what happens is that after this entire thing, so now the Arab world actually wants to ensure that Palestine gets its rightful place back. It wants to wrest control from this entire region, and subsequently what is happening is that there are a lot of calculations, a lot of alliances that are being made in order to make this thing happen. And subsequently in 1964 comes up the foundation which is called the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Okay, now Palestine Liberation Organization is basically a collection of multiple nationalist organizations of Palestine, which basically have one orientation, that we want statehood of Palestine back. Okay, so Palestine Liberation Organization also contains Fatah. It also has as of now Hamas. Both of them basically are parties of this particular thing. So it is much like the Congress of Indian National Congress, which was there with respect to India during the time of 1920s and 30s. So at that particular time, there are multiple orientations which were there within the Congress. There was a socialist orientation, there was a you can say kind of centrist orientation. We had no changers, non-responsivists, all of them were basically but part of Congress. Okay, so this is basically what is the kind of Palestinian Liberation Organization, and today this particular organization PLO is recognized as the official representatives of the Palestinian people. Okay, so in 1974 India became the first country to recognize PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, as the official representatives of Palestinian people. Now basically what happens is that after the formation of PLO in 1967, again an attack is mounted. Okay, now this basically becomes the 6-day war. Though this particular war was fought on 3 fronts: Egypt, Jordan and Syria. Okay, now what happens is that this is called the 6-day war. So at the end of this particular war, Israel has taken back. So the result is, when we talk about the result of this particular war, so now Israel takes control. It takes control of 3 very important regions: Sinai Peninsula, that's the first one. Okay, and Sinai Peninsula is this region. Okay, this is Sinai Peninsula, which was basically a part of Egypt. Okay, then the next thing it takes up is West Bank. Third thing it takes up is Golan Heights. Okay, so it takes up Golan Heights from Syria. So this comes from Syria, this from Jordan, this from Egypt. And till date, it maintains military presence at this particular region, if you can see. Okay, this region is the one which is Golan Heights. Okay, and then this region, which is the West Bank. So all these three regions were the one which were actually captured by Israel. Okay, now the point being, apart from this, it also captured regions of Gulf of Aqaba. Okay, so this particular region is the one which is actually called Gulf of Aqaba. Okay, this region is Aqaba. It captures that as well. So now what basically happens is that in this particular regard, a large amount of territory is lost. So in order to again vest this particular thing back, there is again a war. Now that war is something which happens in 1973, and it is called the Yom Kippur War. Now Yom Kippur basically is a festival for Israel. It is the holiest day of the Israeli calendar. Okay, on this particular day they seek forgiveness from God and the fellow human beings. So it is basically the holiest day of the year for the Israelites, and subsequently on this particular date we see Egypt, okay, Egypt and Syria mounting the attack in order to get their territories back. Okay, so now subsequently what happens is that in this particular regard we see that Yom Kippur War again finds a pushback from Israel. So in 1973, during this particular war, what happens is that both the sides push each other, and subsequently there is a stalemate situation. So after this what comes up is that there is a resolution which comes up in 1967's Six-Day War. After the you can say after this particular occupation by Israel, there was a resolution from United Nations Security Council. So at this particular time there was a United Nations Security Council resolution 242. Okay, it was a resolution 242 which said that the military presence or the military annexation that Israel has done over the parts of Egypt, or for that matter Syria, they need to be returned back. Okay, or for that matter Jordan. So now what happened was that in 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, all these regions were the one which were forced that you need to abandon this war. And subsequently after that what happened was that in 1978 the Camp David Accords were signed between Israel and Egypt. So Israel and Egypt, they basically are the ones who signed the Camp David Accord. So Camp David is one of the residences of the President of the United States in the United States of America. So in that particular you can say agreement, it was finalized that Israel is basically going to give up its claim over the Sinai Egyptian region of Sinai. Okay, and subsequently it is also going to ensure that Egypt and Israel do not come in each other's confrontation. So subsequently then what happened was that after 1979, this entire region, okay, this entire region was the one which went back to Egypt. And subsequently from now we have this particular border which is now going to be called Rafah. Okay, so Rafah is basically the last city in Gaza which borders Egypt. Okay, so Egypt has actually made this entire region hard walled. Why? Because it fears terrorist kind of activities from Hamas. And the second thing, it also does not want retaliation from the Israeli side. So it has completely fortified this particular region. Okay, and this basically became another very strong bone of contention during this particular war. Okay, so this is basically what happened. Then after this particular loss in the Yom Kippur War, the Arab world also recognized that militarily there is no solution to this, and at the same time for Israel also it was realized that Israel will not be able to permanently keep its military presence in the region of Gaza Strip as well as in Sinai. So now in both the regions what happened was that it was eventually understood that we would need to make a more pragmatic kind of solution, and that is why now the solution actually involved you can say conflict resolution instead of use of force. But then subsequently what happens is in 1987 comes up another particular organization which is called Hamas. Okay, in English this particular acronym is actually the Islamic Resistance Front. I will just tell this right now and then subsequently we will discuss the group later. Okay, so this Islamic Resistance Front is basically the one which gets itself established in 1987 and subsequently it is currently the part of PLO. Okay, so now what happens is that because of the military occupation of Jerusalem, because of the military occupation of West Bank and at the same time Gaza Strip, what is happening is that the Palestinians are not able to do any kind of meaningful economic activity. They are not able to have a decent standard of living, and subsequently they basically come up with their own kind of non-cooperation movement. Okay, that was called Intifada. Okay, so Intifada is basically resistance or refusal to cooperate. With Israeli authority. Okay, so where exactly is the Israeli authority being refused to cooperate at? West Bank, Jerusalem and Gaza. So in this particular first Intifada which was there, this was something which was non-violent. Okay, and this was more of a protest. And that is why in this particular regard, the Palestinians were actually able to garner international attention that the Palestinians just want their rightful place back. Okay, and subsequently this particular time also sees the initiation of certain peace processes between Israel and Palestine. Okay, that is something that we are going to see as Oslo Accords. Okay, which were signed in 1993. Then after the failure of this entire you can say Oslo Accords negotiation, the second Intifada started between 2000 and 2005. Now this particular time, this second Intifada which was present, now this is something which was having militant activities. Okay, so there were militant activities. So now instead of being a non-violent movement, this again turned violent. Now there were confrontations and face-off with the Israeli legal law enforcement agencies. Okay, so this second Intifada definitely has been something which has been you can say instigated by the Hamas, and it has got an important you can say it has got an important element of involvement of Hamas. So in this particular time, it is seen that Iran basically is very interested in supplying the weapons and ammunitions to Hamas. Why? Because Iran and Israel are not friends. So they would want each other's mutual destruction. Okay, Israel does not want Iran to have nuclear power. Iran does not want Israel to exist, and that is why it allies with Hamas. Okay. So in this entire you can say calculus, this is basically what came up, the Oslo Peace Accords. So Oslo Peace Accords were basically a step towards establishing lasting and viable peace in the region of you can say West Bank, Gaza Strip and Jerusalem between Palestine and Israel. Okay, so this particular thing was a persistent push coming from USA, European powers and even the Arab world, because they also could not finance this particular you can say expedition against the Israeli. Okay, so subsequently the representative from the Palestinian side was Yasser Arafat. Okay, so this is Yasser Arafat. Okay, he is from Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. Okay, he is heading that. Now this is Rabin who is actually Prime Minister of Israel. Okay, and this is Shimon Peres, Foreign Minister of Israel. Okay. Now, all of these individuals as of now in this particular photograph, they are actually receiving Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. This picture is actually them having their Nobel Peace Prize and subsequently the certificates where you can find this Alfred Nobel written. Okay. Now, they were bestowed this particular honor because they attempted the first ever peaceful resolution of this conflict and it yielded certain results. Okay, and this result was that after the Oslo Peace Accords, there was going to be a different kind of cooperation between Palestine and Israel. First of all, the region of West Bank is something which is going to be divided in 3 different regions. Okay, now these 3 different regions were Area A, B and C. So Area A basically were those settlements where Palestinian Arabs were in majority. Okay, so these regions were under direct control of the Palestinian people or the Palestinian government. Okay, Area B was basically the place which was having you can say the population from both the you can say communities, Palestinians as well as Israelis. So subsequently this particular region would be the one which would be jointly administered by both the you can say countries. And then there was Area C. Now Area C was basically the region which actually was you can say under the control of the Israelis, and this is something which will remain under the control of Israelis. Okay, so even in West Bank where it is expected that we have the population of Palestinian Arabs, even there we see that it is Israeli people who have actually populated this region to a large extent, and this has been a constant policy of the Israeli government as well. So subsequently what would happen is that this is something which was going to be recognized that here there will be a three types of government. One which is Palestinian government is going to have control over the regions which are given under Area A. Okay, here only Palestinian government, and this is exactly where the Palestinian government as of now exists. Okay, so this is basically the Area A, B and C, and this was something with respect to the West Bank. Apart from that, Gaza was something which was to be given as full Palestinian control. So this region, Gaza, is going to be under full Palestinian control, and West Bank, this was basically going to be the structure. And eventually in 5 years transition, the settlement would be done with respect to the international boundaries, and then Palestinian statehood would be recognized. But the point is, by 1999 nothing happened, so that is why you had the second intifada happening. Okay, so now with respect to the two-state solution, this is exactly what they say, that there should be peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence of Israel and Palestine. Okay, but this peaceful coexistence is something which is based upon the Resolution 242. Resolution 242 of United Nations Security Council, and based upon this we are again going back to the same borders which were there in the initial solution of United Nations. So based upon this, West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza Strip. Okay, this together are going to be called Palestine. This is basically what will become the state of Palestine. Now this will be a sovereign territory. This will not be under Israeli occupation, and all the rest places are going to be Israel. And these countries are to exist peacefully with each other. They will have the rights to have engagement with respect to each other, with respect to economy, with respect to access to ports and everything. So this is basically what is the two-state solution which is always in the news. Okay, I hope this is something which is clear. Now this two-state solution has got different meanings for everyone. Okay, with respect to Israel and Palestine, the two-state solution which is officially recognized is the one which is accepted and given by the United Nations. With respect to India, This two-state solution also involves a mutual agreement or consent between these two countries. That these two countries should also have a mutual agreement between the two that okay, we are going to live together. So unless that is done, it is not going to be the complete fulfillment of the principle of you can say self-determination. Okay, so this is the two-state solution. Now Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority, it is officially called the Palestinian National Authority. Okay, so this is basically the government of Palestinian settlements in West Bank. Okay, they basically are from the Palestinian settlements of West Bank. Now this is something which is actually an outcome. Okay, it's an outcome of the Oslo Accords. Okay, Oslo, if you want to know, this is basically the capital of Norway. Okay, so that basically Oslo Accords recognize that okay, the Palestinian people will be ruled or they will be governed by the Palestinian National Authority, and this is something which will be having the control. This will be having control over this region. Okay, West Bank settlements and Gaza. Now basically what happened was that in 2006, after the popular election, this particular region Gaza was the one where Hamas came to power. Towards the end of 2006, so 2006, 2007 I am going to write. Okay, and the West Bank settlements, this is basically where we have Fatah that is in power. Okay, so Fatah as of now is the one which is in the position of negotiation. Hamas is the one which does not want to negotiate. Okay, so this is the Palestinian Authority as of now. So right now Palestinian Authority is the only form of government that Israel also recognizes for this particular region. Now when you talk about Palestine Liberation Organization, I have just told you that it was something which was formed in 1964. Okay, these are basically a collection of nationalist organizations. Okay, and the biggest of them, okay, the biggest of them is Fatah. Okay, so Fatah basically is their political party. It's a political party. There are other organizations as well, but Fatah is by far the biggest. Okay, now this particular organization also includes Hamas. But since 2006, Fatah and Hamas, they do not associate with each other because Hamas, the means of Hamas is something which is disagreed to by Fatah. Okay, and that is why they do not associate very closely with each other. But yes, Fatah has definitely recommended Hamas that if it gives up violence, there could be a peaceful solution to this conflict. Okay, so now talking about Hamas, 1987 is its foundation. Okay, I've already told you it's the Islamic Resistance Front. That is basically its official English equivalent. Okay, this basically is the one which has a militant arm as well. Okay, it has a militant arm funded by Iran. Okay, now with respect to Hamas, the objective of Hamas is complete obliteration of Israel, that there should be no Israel. Okay, establishment of Islamic State in the mandatory or British Mandate of Palestine. So the entire region which as of now is recognized as Israel, in that region as well as the region where Palestine as of now wants to establish its statehood, it wants this entire region is the one which should be declared as Palestine, and it should be an Islamic nation, not a Jewish nation. Okay, and based upon this particular objective, they basically undertake violent attacks. Okay, so these violent attacks are basically the ones which represent a lot of assassination, murders, killings, kidnappings, bomb blasts. Okay, so these are basically the things that they do. So Hamas is basically declared a terrorist organization by most of the countries. It's a terrorist organization in most of the countries, but its major benefactor is Iran. So Hamas leadership is found in Iran, some of it is found in Qatar, some of it is found in Egypt. Okay, these are basically the regions where we have Hamas leadership or the people of Hamas operating from. Now, when we talk about India's policy towards Israel and Palestine issue, so during the very start, okay, we basically had a policy where we saw Israel as an aggressor and Palestine as a victim. This was something which was actually the idea of Gandhi, that this was basically a land which had Arab majority and which saw its majority population being driven out by a minority one. So this in his eyes were wrong, and subsequently based upon that, a lot of people in Indian National Congress also thought so. So that is why in 1948 when Israel gained its independence, India did not recognize Israel. Okay, you will be shocked to know that India and Israel as of now, they share a very close and very strategic bond with each other, but till 1992 we had no diplomatic relations. We basically saw Israel as the problem cause of Palestine, and we wanted to represent the voice of Palestine in the international forum. And that is why there was something that whenever there will be the concept of Israel, it will always be considered through the lens of Palestine. So there will be no consideration of Israel without Palestine's recognition. That was basically the policy before 1992. After 1992, we did this dehyphenation. Now dehyphenation basically came in 1992. Now basically what happened after 1992, we engaged separately with Israel and Palestine. We engaged with them separately. Okay, and this basically led to the establishment of diplomatic relations with Israel. Okay, this is what we did. So that is something which is called as dehyphenation in the Indian foreign policy. Okay, now with respect to the you can say the policy between India and Israel, India still advocates that Palestine is a nation. Okay, so India was basically one of the first countries to recognize the statehood of Palestine. So India was the first country outside the Arab world to recognize Palestine. So as of now, India recognizes Palestine as a separate nation. Okay. Recognize Palestine. Now this is something which happened in 1988. So you can yourself see, even before the time when we established our diplomatic relations with Israel, we recognize Palestine as a sovereign country. Okay, now this is basically how we have balanced this thing together. Okay, and India basically has got its embassy in Ramallah. That is basically the current capital of Palestine. Okay, earlier it was in Gaza as well, but in 2003 it was permanently shifted to Ramallah, which is currently the capital. Okay, now when we talk about India and Israel, so India and Israel have their diplomatic relations dating back to 1992. Currently, they are strategic partners. Okay, they are strategic partners. Basically, it means that they have very, very deep connections with respect to intelligence sharing, security, defense equipment, for that matter, trade. Okay, so these are a lot of things which basically are there between India and Israel. Even when Israel-Hamas conflict broke out, Israeli embassy carried out special recruitment programs in many of the states like Haryana and Uttar Pradesh to recruit the local youths to work in the Israeli industries, because the Israelites are right now fighting with Hamas, so the work needs to be done. So for that, a large amount of recruitment actually happened from India, and subsequently that happened from UP and Haryana. So we are strategic partners. We share very common goals of eliminating terrorism. We also support each other's stance. But at the same time, India has always balanced its approach with Israel. Okay, India supports that Israel has its right of existence, but at the same time, it also supports that Palestine also has the right of existence. So that is how we balance this. Okay. Now, what exactly is the stance of India with respect to this entire conflict? So in 2023, when this particular conflict broke out, at that particular time, India vehemently opposed it. Okay, so India was opposed to any kind of terrorist activities wherever they happen in the world, and with respect to Israel, they opposed it outrightly. Subsequently, then at the same time, it also is a prompt supporter of peaceful resolution of this dispute, and that is why one of its first call was immediate ceasefire, because this was something where the civilians were actually bearing the brunt, especially in the Gaza Strip. So that is why India has a greater interest in securing humanitarian aid with respect to Gaza instead of you can say fueling this particular war. So that is why it basically has implored both of these parties to engage in meaningful discussions and stop hostilities against each other, put humanity in their first place, and subsequently also allow for humanitarian aid to reach Palestine and rescue of all the hostages from both the sides. Okay, so India has been in active touch with both of these countries. Now, let us discuss what exactly is the 20-point plan with respect to this particular region given by Donald Trump. So Donald Trump actually had already given one particular plan in 2020 where he you can say extended full support and recognition of Jerusalem to become a territory of Israel. But this particular plan, which was given on 29th September 2025, is greatly modified. So this particular plan has one very, very important aspect, that it wants Hamas to accept it. Okay, so it basically says if Israel and Hamas agree to this particular plan, there will be immediate ceasefire, and after that immediate ceasefire there will be an immediate release of all humanitarian aid for Gaza. Okay, so that is basically the first thing that has been said, that if Israel and Hamas come to a deal and Israel comes with a public endorsement that it is going to cease and ensure a ceasefire, the end of hostility is going to be there, and subsequently this is going to ensure that immediate release of you can say relief material would be done. Okay, the second thing, hostage release. So both the parties are going to release the hostages, okay, either alive or dead. So for the dead, you have to return the remains, and for the alive, you basically have to release the hostages on both the sides. At the same time, it has also been said that Israel will also release about 1,700 prisoners, exiled Palestinians, detained Palestinians to Gaza, and subsequently it will also reciprocate the release of remains of the you can say prisoners or other individuals who were actually detained during this particular time. At the same time, Hamas also has been instructed that you have to do this. Okay, that you have to release the hostages or the remains back, and subsequently you will be getting this. Now with respect to Hamas, it has been said that you are going to give up weapons. Give up weapons. Okay, then no participation in the government. Absolute no participation, okay, in the government, and subsequently they will be given a safe passage to any country they want to go, to the host countries. In this case, that would be Egypt, Qatar, and Iran. So safe passage basically means that they will be having the freedom to leave without getting killed or without getting arrested. Okay, but for that to happen, you have to agree to an immediate disarmament of Hamas. Okay, that you have to give up arms, you have to give up the idea of coming back to this particular power again, and subsequently you will be given this amnesty, and subsequently you will be given amnesty. Amnesty basically means all your crimes, all your acts will be pardoned off. Okay, you will have no sanctions, you can start your life afresh. So that is basically the offer that has been given to Hamas, and this is the sticking point with Hamas. Because Hamas feels that if they give up their weapons, if they give up their, you can say, idea of coming back to power, how exactly are they going to wrest the control of the Gaza Strip? This is the sticking point. Okay. Now, there will be an international stabilization force. So now what is going to happen after this particular plan has been agreed to? So what is going to happen? The demilitarization process is going to start. The Israeli defense forces are going to come out, and instead of them, there will be an international stabilization force which will be led by USA, okay, which will have troops from European countries and Arab countries. Okay, Arab countries. Now they basically are the ones who are going to be posted here, and their responsibility is to train Palestinian police in law and order. So as long as this is something which is going to be the situation, that Palestine basically gets its personnel in order, so they are going to be the one who are going to be present here. Okay. So international stabilization force will be deployed in all those regions where it has been, you can say, said, or it has been confirmed that there is no presence of Hamas. Okay. So as soon as either Hamas agrees to it, and even if it disagrees, in all those regions which does not have any Hamas presence, this is going to be the current, you can say, security forces which are going to provide security. Okay. And if Hamas completely gives up, then this is going to replace the entire Israeli defense forces. Okay. Now, humanitarian aid and reconstruction activities are to begin immediately as soon as this particular plan is agreed to. Okay. There will be a board of peace that will be headed by the President of United States of America, POTUS. Okay. And at the same time, this particular board is the one which will be, you can say, invested in reconstruction of Gaza completely. So Gaza will basically become a city of peace or a region of peace, and subsequently all the kind of reconstruction activities here are going to be handled by the board of peace. So they will be having an investment trust, and that is the one which is going to take care of the expenses here. Okay. Then there will be a transitional government for Gaza. Okay. And this is something which will be led by Palestinian technocrats. Okay, so Palestinian technocrats basically means the individuals who basically have got knowledge of technical subjects like engineers. So Palestinian technocrats, okay, international experts and well-meaning Palestinian educated people who are going to run this particular place as long as they do not get a democratically elected stable government. So that is going to be the transitional government, and eventually there will be the path for statehood for Palestine. Okay, so eventually it will basically be the path for the statehood of Palestine. These are basically the major points with respect to the 20-point plan. So I hope this particular video gave you an entire you can say a picture of what exactly is the scenario with respect to you have Israel and Palestine conflict. How exactly has India responded to it? What exactly is the stance for India? So I hope this is something which has now become very clear and you will not get confused in any part. Okay. If you have any doubt, please comment. I know that this particular video becomes long, but one video that is going to solve all your problems is much better than reading 10 articles and then not getting anything out of it. Okay. So I believe that this is something that you will appreciate, and at the same time you are also going to like, share and subscribe. Okay. So with this, I leave you with these social media handles. Please, it will be really nice if you actually come to these channels and help us grow so that we can come up with better and better content for you every single time. So till next time, thank you so much.